There is a specific kind of anxiety that doesn't come with panic or racing thoughts. It's quieter than that. It shows up in the background of your day, in the pauses between tasks, in moments when you slow down just enough to notice something feels off. You wake up, move through your routine, and nothing is obviously wrong. You're functioning, you're doing what you're supposed to do. But underneath it, there's a low, persistent unease, a sense that you should want something more clearly than you do. A feeling that other people seem to know where they're going, while you're still unsure. This isn't the anxiety of fear. It's the anxiety of not knowing your direction. Most people don't talk about this because it's hard to describe. It doesn't sound dramatic. There's no crisis to point to. You're not falling apart. You're just drifting. And the longer that drift continues, the more uncomfortable it becomes. You might feel it when someone asks a simple question like, "What do you actually want?" Or, "Where do you see yourself in a few years?" And your mind goes quiet. Not because you haven't thought about it, but because every answer feels incomplete, temporary, or borrowed from someone else's expectations. You might notice it after finishing something you worked toward for a long time. A degree, a promotion, a move. You expect relief or excitement, but instead there's a strange emptiness, like you reached a checkpoint, but there was no clear next step waiting for you. This is the quiet anxiety of not knowing what you want, and it's becoming more common. We live in a time where clarity is treated like a requirement. We're told we should know our passions, our goals, our purpose, that by a certain age we should have a direction that feels solid and confident. But modern life doesn't actually support that kind of certainty. Paths are less stable. Roles change quickly. Options are endless. And when everything is available, choosing one direction feels heavier. Committing means closing other doors, and that creates hesitation. So instead of choosing, many people wait. They wait for certainty. They wait for motivation. They wait for a feeling that says, "This is it." And while they wait, life keeps moving. Days fill up with responsibilities. Time passes quietly, and that low-level anxiety settles in. What makes this feeling especially difficult is that it doesn't give you clear signals. There's no obvious threat, no single problem to solve, just a sense of being slightly misaligned with your own life. You might still be productive. You might still be successful by external standards, but internally, there's a feeling that you're living in preparation mode instead of engagement mode, like you're always getting ready for something that hasn't arrived yet. And because this doesn't look like traditional anxiety, many people dismiss it. They tell themselves they're ungrateful or indecisive or broken for not knowing what they want. But that assumption is part of the problem. Not knowing what you want doesn't automatically mean something is wrong with you. In many cases, it means something more subtle is happening, something we were never taught how to recognize. This video isn't about forcing clarity or finding the passion. It's not about designing a perfect plan or fixing yourself. It's about understanding why this quiet anxiety exists in the first place and what it's actually pointing toward. Because the absence of clear desire isn't always a failure. Sometimes it's a signal that the way we've been taught to choose doesn't match the world we're living in now. And until we understand that, this anxiety doesn't disappear. It stays quietly present, shaping decisions from the background. In the next part, we'll look at why modern life makes it harder to know what you want, even when you're doing everything right. To understand why this feeling is so common now, we need to look at how modern life shapes desire. In the past, wanting something was often tied to necessity. You wanted stability because you needed it. You wanted progress because there was a clear path forward. Choices were limited, but direction was clearer. Today, most people don't lack options. They lack gravity. When everything is accessible, nothing pulls strongly enough to commit to. Desire used to grow from friction, repetition, and time. Now it's constantly interrupted. We're exposed to thousands of alternative lives, careers, lifestyles, and identities every day. Even without realizing it, your mind is comparing, evaluating, and recalibrating constantly. This makes it harder for any single direction to feel solid. Instead of asking, "What do I want?" your mind quietly asks, "What if there's something better?" That question doesn't lead to clarity. It leads to hesitation. Over time, this creates a subtle form of anxiety. Not fear, but instability. You start to feel like every choice is provisional, temporary, reversible, and when nothing feels final, nothing feels fully chosen. This is why many people feel stuck even while moving. They change jobs, move cities, adjust routines, start new projects. But the internal feeling stays the same because the problem isn't action, it's orientation. Another layer of this anxiety comes from how success is presented. We're surrounded by finished stories, people who seem certain, people who appear aligned, fulfilled, confident. What we don't see is the confusion that came before, or the compromises that followed. So when your own desire feels unclear, it's easy to assume you're behind, that you missed something everyone else figured out. But clarity is often retroactive. People understand what they wanted only after they've lived it for a while, not before. The pressure to know in advance creates a false standard, and when you don't meet that standard, self-doubt fills the gap. This is where the anxiety becomes personal. You stop questioning the system and start questioning yourself. You wonder why you can't commit, why nothing feels right, why motivation comes and goes, why your interests fade as soon as you start taking them seriously. But this isn't a character flaw. It's a predictable response to a world that asks you to define yourself before you've had the chance to experience yourself deeply. When desire is treated like an identity statement instead of a process, uncertainty feels like failure. And so many people try to solve this anxiety by thinking harder, by analyzing themselves, by searching for the right label, the right path, the right answer. But the more you stay in your head, the louder the uncertainty becomes. Because desire doesn't form an abstraction. It forms through engagement, through contact, through doing something long enough for preference to emerge. When you don't allow yourself to stay with anything, desire never gets the time it needs to develop weight. So instead, you're left with vague interest but no conviction, curiosity but no direction, options but no pull. This is the emotional state many people are living in without having language for it. They're not lazy. They're not unmotivated. They're disoriented. And disorientation creates anxiety because the nervous system wants to know where it's going. It wants a sense of trajectory. Without that, even comfortable lives start to feel unstable. In the next part, we'll talk about what this anxiety is actually asking from you. Not a decision, not a plan, but a different way of relating to uncertainty itself. So, what do you actually do with this feeling? If not knowing what you want creates anxiety, the instinct is to resolve it as quickly as possible, to make a decision, to pick a direction, to force clarity. But that urgency is often what keeps the anxiety alive, because clarity doesn't come from pressure, it comes from contact. The shift is subtle but important. Instead of asking, "What do I want?" the better question becomes, "What am I willing to stay with?" Wanting is unreliable when you're disconnected from experience, but willingness is grounded. It doesn't require certainty. It requires presence. This is where many people get stuck, because staying with something feels risky. It means tolerating boredom, discomfort, and doubt without immediately escaping into alternatives. But that tolerance is exactly what allows desire to form. When you stay with an activity, a role, or a direction long enough, your nervous system starts to register what fits and what doesn't. Not conceptually, but physically. You notice when energy increases instead of drains, when resistance turns into engagement, when effort feels meaningful rather than forced. This doesn't happen quickly, and it doesn't happen through thinking. It happens through time and repetition. The anxiety you feel isn't asking you to find the perfect answer. It's asking you to stop hovering above your life and actually step into it, even imperfectly, even without guarantees. This means choosing something small and finite to commit to, not because it's your passion, but because you're willing to be present with it. A project, a routine, a responsibility, something that creates continuity. Continuity is what anxiety lacks, and continuity is what slowly restores orientation. You don't need to decide who you are. You need to give yourself enough sustained experience for preferences to become real. This also means letting go of the idea that desire should feel exciting right away. Often, what ends up mattering starts as neutral or even uncomfortable. Interest deepens through friction. Meaning forms through effort. And confidence follows consistency, not clarity. When you stop demanding certainty before engagement, something changes internally. The anxiety softens, not because you've solved your life, but because you've stopped waiting to live it. You're no longer asking your future self to justify your present actions. You're allowing the present to inform the future instead. This doesn't eliminate uncertainty, but it changes your relationship to it. Uncertainty stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like a condition you can move within. And that's enough. That's how direction quietly emerges. Not all at once, not dramatically, but gradually, through accumulated moments of staying. If something in this resonated, don't turn it into a plan. Just notice where you've been avoiding commitment because you felt you needed certainty first. And once in a while, stay. That's enough. That's where things begin to shift. If this way of thinking connected with you, you might want to stay around. This channel is for people who feel this quiet disorientation and want to understand it rather than escape it. You can subscribe if you want to explore these ideas over time.